Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively taking a little respite on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I will be having 31 crab cakes in 31 days during the month of August. But we're going to be taking it out later on in the month. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Goodwill and our newest sponsor, Window Nation, where you buy two, you get two free. It's simple as that. And me being a cheapskate, that's what I did. Go to windownation.com to learn more. I'm going to be learning more. I'm going to be in Europa for a short period of time and returning. And on the 16th of June, it's a monumental date. I mean, the last time I think I sat around, I mean, the Ravens just happened when Art showed up in the parking lot, but there was that waiting on the Carolina situation, waiting on Jacksonville. Feels like a minute ago, but it's been 30 years. I don't know that we've ever sat around and waited for the Papal smoke or whatever it is, but we're going to have that and an opportunity to do something that I don't think the community really understands. People in the soccer community may understand what this could all entail. And I'm sort of bringing the band back together here, sort of last chance before we either thumbs up and this is the greatest thing ever, or what the hell happened and how did Boston get games or Philadelphia and we didn't. Marty Conway is here to educate me and keep me in line. Marty, first thing, it's great to visit with you. We got Springsteen going back out on the road. You know, I saw Robert Plant last week. We got McCartney this week. We got Ringo Starr. All of this is going on. But this World Cup thing, you've been at this from the beginning with Qatar and what's happening over there. I've seen pictures of you on the camels over in other parts of the world, and you understand what this means. But are you shocked that we're 10 days out and you may predict that I don't know what you're going to predict, but we might get games. I'm still pinchy about this.
Oh yeah, for sure. Look, I think you said it well earlier when you said there are people in the soccer and tourism, Maryland State tourism and Baltimore and Team Maryland. But outside of that, look, I think it's still, scratch ahead. Hey, we're doing what? Oh, it's because it's 2026. It's 4 years out, roughly around that time. So for most people, given the conditions today, they're just not really thinking about anything like that. But the FIFA community, the Olympic community for LA in 2028, they're already well underway with their progress. Now, obviously, we've got to play the 2022 World Cup here in November and December in Qatar. But soon after that, then you really got to start thinking about what happens, because these preparations, take some time. I'm sure there'll be some additional work that has to be done on M&T Stadium. And if you're asking me today, I would say I think Baltimore and Washington as a combined effort will be one of either 10 or 11 cities awarded games. Reminder, there's going to be one of the big differences, there's going to be 60 games in the United States. In the 2026 World Cup, there'll be 48 teams. So we're adding another layer of games. And so Mexico and Canada are going to get a small amount, but the bulk of those 80 games, 60 of them will be in the United States. That takes 10 or 11 cities, maybe a city like LA getting two locations, SoFi Stadium and the Rose Bowl, to split. Because if you're talking about 10 or 11 cities and stadiums and 60 games, now you're talking about 5, 6, 7 games in a location. And that's why I think initially they were thinking 10. I think they could easily find 11. I wouldn't be surprised even if it ends up at 12, because there are really good cities, including Baltimore and Washington, in this final group as far as U.S. cities.
For the uninitiated, Marty, I would just say this. You were part of getting an AllStar Game here. I mean, it's been 30 years, 29 years now, right? And it's never come back up because of the old man, and you and I have spent a decade talking about this, right? That would have been a really good thing. I lament the Orioles being jackasses with the Keith Urban show and what could have been for the city on a celebratory note for one night. It would have been, a Star-Spangled Celebration or whatever it would have been. We never would be in a Final Four conversation. We barely get McCartney once a year, Billy Joel 3 years ago, Springsteen once in a while. What Coldplay skipped us, right? Whatever these big events would be that would fill a stadium, fill a convention center, fill the hotels, create a festival in the street, create full restaurants in Little Italy and full Roost Chris's and full Beaumonts and everywhere else, right? Super Bowl, if we were bidding on a Super Bowl and had a chance to get it, the city would be electric about that. If we were bidding on an all-star game, like really, even though baseball is clearly what it is at this point, it would be a big deal. There's not buzz on this because I don't think rank and file really understands the World Cup. It hasn't been played here most people's lifetime, 35 years, whatever it's been, right? And 30 years. But for this and for what it will mean for the city to have this happen next week, Marty, I've been to the last 28 Super Bowls. This will be better for us than a Super Bowl would be in regard to people, parties, restaurants, hotel, all of that. This is way bigger than an all-star game or a Super Bowl would have ever have been here. And even though we never would have gotten that, or a Final Four, we never would have gotten that either.
Yeah, and I think if you add the fact that I think it would, I would say even at this point, it's likely that the U.S. team would play here as one of those games, because one of the key things about when you go back and look at FIFA's awarding of World Cups to nations over the last 30 years, I couldn't really find a time, maybe I missed one, where the nation's capital wasn't included in in that participation. Now, DC would have had a much, much, much better shot at games had the stadium in Landover been invested in over the last 25 years. Would I say this again? The decision to invest by the state of Maryland in the Camden Yards complex, first baseball, and then including in the legislation that the football stadium would be built, you didn't have to go back and get legislative approval, has been the biggest windfall into the region, in addition to what not only the Ravens, but the state of Maryland have continued to invest in those facilities. That's the difference. If they had not invested in M&T Stadium over the last 25 years, then you would not see, you'd see DC being the principal. But now we know that the technical inspection really made a difference and that Baltimore's stadium is done well. Now, the second part of that, technical specs are one thing and they're really important because you play the matches there. Question is, how much money can FIFA generate between the Baltimore-Washington corridor over that 3 weeks or so of hosting those first, second, maybe third level matches? That's what they look at, because at the end of the day, this is about generating $4, $5, or $6 billion for FIFA per each World Cup cycle. And so not only is the technical specs, but how much money can they generate? And which is why I think the Washington-Baltimore corridor has a really solid opportunity, because there's a lot of money, including sponsorship dollars. Look, if you take Washington off of this, you immediately slice off probably 80% of the sponsorship opportunities because of government contractors and all the other type of companies that are headquartered or invested in DC.
Yeah,
exactly.
All the diplomats, all the consulates, all that stuff that goes on down there, they need to be involved in this, right? I mean, that's why you want Los Angeles, New York involved, because of the international population, probably Miami as well. But more than that, all the powers in DC.
Yeah. And it's so, like I said, back to FIFA making this decision as to where, unlike the Olympics, where they say we're picking one city, Los Angeles in 2028, Paris in 2024, FIFA says we're going to be countrywide, right? Brazil, Russia, Qatar, even though it's mainly just Doha. That's the difference. And so they want to reach between Vancouver, will probably be in it for Canada, all the way down to Miami, who will likely be in it in the United States. So when you look at that, that's the kind of geography that they want. And I think also time zones matter. Keep in mind, these games are going out across the rest of the world. And so we've got 3 or 4 time zones in the US and Canada to deal with. And so they want to have a nice distribution of match times where you can play games in the East Coast, Central Time Zone, Western Time Zone, so that those games go out to all parts of the world at key times, so that, that's why you're not going to see 6 or 7 cities on the East Coast and none in the Midwest and 2 on the West Coast. There's going to be a nice distribution time zone wise, because they take into account when matches start here, what time are they played in Beijing, and what time are they played in Cape Town, and what time are they played in Dubai, just like that.
Marty Conway is the good professor. We learn things. He is at Georgetown University. One time with Major League Baseball and the Orioles and the Rangers and all that stuff, trying to keep us abreast on all this. I'm going to talk to more people about this, and then obviously on the backside. And Marty, I'm getting a little cocky. I'm trying to plan an event on Friday the 17th that in my mind is a celebratory event for soccer people, to bring some soccer people, to try to bring some color to, and obviously you could be included in this, or anybody that can that wants to celebrate this. What are we celebrating here if this were to happen? And the fact that the underdog side of what Terry has done here locally, and for us to even be having a conversation that we think now we're in like Cincinnati or Nashville, that have been, by almost all accounts, they're not going to get, it doesn't feel like they're on the inside. For some reason, it does feel like we are on the inside. We're never on the inside, Marty. You know this. You've been here forever.
Yeah, no, like I said, back to that technical specs, back to the relationship with DC and bundling those two cities together. So the question initially you asked is what? Well, first of all, it's massive international exposure. Like I said, this is an event that surpasses the Summer Olympics. This is an event that will generate 4 billion eyeballs, maybe as many as 5 billion upcoming out of 7 or 8 billion eyeballs on the planet. So it's unprecedented in terms of its reach. It's also unprecedented in terms of what it brings together. Baltimore has had bits and pieces of this, right? They've hosted international friendly matches. They have one coming up this July, but they've had Gold Cup. We've talked about this before. I was in the stands when Honduras played El Salvador. Obviously two countries, outside of the U.S. playing in Baltimore. It was an environment unlike I'd ever seen before or heard before. And so you're going to have that kind of environment because these supporters do travel, keeping in mind there's going to be 48 teams. So if you X out the US, Mexico, and Canada, those are 45 other nations sending people to these three countries to do that. So the travel, the infusion, what's going to happen in terms of it will turn the downtown footprint and the airport into this really bustling, you'll get this international feel, probably like you've never felt before. Because in the past, we just had matches, Gold Cup, and they left. This is a whole different experience because FIFA does a lot of things different marketing-wise, and they will maximize the opportunity. Keep in mind, all of this has to be done under Swiss law, so there's a lot of tax exemptions, a lot of preferences that happen. So there will be money made, but believe me, FIFA is going to take more out than anybody puts in, but that's just the way that this works if you want to be involved in this massive once in a lifetime opportunity.
But it does also create Uber transportation, left behind money, people drinking beer in Fells Point, people filling up restaurants, people filling up hotels, people visiting the airport, people visiting the train station, like all elements of that. It's extraordinary on a level, and I hope we're beyond the plague and COVID and wars and all these awful things that have been going on that have been very disruptive in our lives here the last couple of years. But all of that being flat, this in America, coming to America for the first time since 1994, people will be lining up from all over the world to want to come here and see Las Vegas and Disney World and see their team play, or come and be a part of a celebration in some way that I just don't think the locals really understand. And that's where on the other end of this, the fact that we can be predictive and say, we think this is going to happen, but until it happens, then we can start to dream the dream a little bit. What gets in the way? I mean, I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to the other part of the world, and I'm wondering to myself, what's going to screw this up? Because, in some of these projections, Bob Kraft's going to get screwed. I can't imagine that after all, he's on the board, right? So, so I can't imagine they don't get games. But who gets slighted in this? Or do they find some way to maybe have 12 or 13 cities and say, all right, Philadelphia, you're not really involved, but here's 2 games for you. Is there such a thing for that?
Well, it's about money. So money, you say what could get in the way? It's about money, and it's about influence. And yes, are there opportunities for individuals, some of whom you named, and maybe some that have not been named, to have influence for sure. Do keep in mind, though, that the technical specs of the stadium matter above all else, because FIFA does not put their premier matches, and these are the top of the line for FIFA, the Men's World Cup. They do not put them in facilities that have even a small chance of having a problem. You know, if the grass isn't growing, or there's corners that aren't wide enough to have quality corner kicks, or facilities underneath for the teams and all of that. That trumps everything, with the exception of additional money, excuse me, additional opportunity to make revenue via local sponsorships, bringing in that. So Bob Kraft and some others can probably bring some wealthy friends together and almost guarantee certain sponsorships and certain support along the way, which again is why perhaps I think it grows beyond maybe 10, that it creeps into the 11 or 12, like you said. At that point, then you're only Xing out cities, like you said, like Cincinnati, maybe Nashville. Nashville does not have a stadium that would be suitable for this. Probably Xing out an Orlando, because you're probably not going to have Orlando and Miami, perhaps. So there'll be some secondary cities that might be an obvious cut line. So I don't know that 10 will be the hard and
Or
fast
Houston and
number.
Dallas get a bid that's a Texas bid. Does that make any sense or no?
Well, I think they're probably going to stand on their own. And here's why. I think Dallas, with Jerry Jones in the stadium, they're going to get a jewel event. I see them getting a semifinal match in addition to some other events along the way. Remember, FIFA wants to schedule this in a way where you're not going to have a home stadium. Mexico's not going to be based in Houston and play in Dallas only. That's not going to happen, because they don't want teams to come back to the semifinals or maybe even the quarterfinals and have played there before while the other team hasn't. So they try to balance that in a way. But I think Houston's got such a drawn, and Miami have such well-established Latino markets. I think it's a given. I think Dallas is a jewel city for a quarter and more probably a semifinal. But then, like I said, you start to, would Denver still be in the mix? I don't know. Would Kansas City be in the mix? Might they cancel each other out? Cincinnati and Nashville, Orlando, probably cities that, may not rise to the level because of what can't make as much money perhaps there, or the facility itself. Paul Brown Stadium would need a lot of renovation just to play football matches there, because they just typically don't do that there. So I mean, real
Well, and
football.
then Seattle and Santa Clara feel like they're earmarked as well, right?
Yeah, I think Seattle, again, if I had to say a given, they've got such a mature soccer market and such a well-established history of hosting, again, international friendlies, Gold Cup matches. Between Seattle and Portland, it's almost like Baltimore and Washington. It's a really nice combination. It's a hotbed for soccer. Santa Clara, look, again, it's,
A lot of
Silicon
money.
Valley, a lot of money, Silicon Valley. And again, it's in that Western time zone: Vancouver, Seattle, Santa Clara, LA, Monterey, I think is the Mexico. So you've got these kind of the way that this plans out. But again, it's tech specs, it's the ability to generate money. It's obviously hospitality and transportation, it's security. These are some of the top things that FIFA, it's public. You can go out and look at their sort of checklist on how this breaks down. So again, it's already been decided. It's the United States and Canada, Mexico, the first time we're going to host a 48 team World Cup. And so that is in and of itself probably is what creates the most opportunity for this region, is the expanded nature of the World Cup bring cities like Baltimore and maybe a few others into play that in the past, might not have made the cut just based on size and scope.
Does this get you excited a little bit? I mean, you're
Yeah.
old and jaded, and I'm a little old and pretty jaded. It does not much gets me excited. The All-Star Game and the things that we've had here
Yeah.
and those kind of memories we've made here in Baltimore, and even getting a concert. There's a rumor that a certain New Jersey rocker may be opening the new downtown arena as well at some point. So these big events that we get the Preakness, we talk about it every year. Does this get you excited? Will you, when this happen, will it bring a little lump to your throat and say, wow, man, this is really something, the World Cup coming to
Yeah.
Baltimore. I never thought I'd see this.
Yeah. And I think fans and people listening to this and fans of soccer will, when they get to be, even if the US is not playing here, if you get an opportunity to, like I said, that Honduras El Salvador match that I was at, if you get two African countries. You get some sort of rivalry. You get the Italians, who hopefully will make the World Cup by 2026 after missing the last couple. That's just something that it's just a once in a lifetime. We're not going to Rome to see them play. You're going to get an opportunity in Europe. There is still some soccer going on there, so you'll get a sense of that. That's what really gets people. I mean, you saw what happened in Paris for UEFA Cup final when Liverpool was playing Real Madrid. Like, these are massively intense fans. Sometimes it gets a little out of hand, but that sort of intensity, you just can't create that, even with an NFL rival matchup, or if the Yankees are playing the Orioles. It just doesn't rise to that level because it's literally once in a lifetime opportunity. And in 1994, the U.S. was a neophyte in world soccer, right? We didn't have a national league. That was the whole idea of the '94 World Cup, was to launch, the professional soccer league here in the United States. And so it's a completely different environment. Yeah, we missed the last World Cup. We've qualified for this one. Now, if the U.S.
Made the grade 8 since then, by the way.
Exactly. Now, if the U.S.
Yeah.
can do well in World Cups, particularly this year, that will make a big difference, because it's all about getting to the round of 8 or the semifinals. Everything else in terms of World Cup, we don't remember who made the round of 16 4 years ago. We barely remember the quarterfinals unless there's a great Argentina-Italy match or something like that. So that's what really brings out the passion, is if the local franchise, my gosh, even Mexico, if you got the Mexicans to play here for some reason, which I don't think would happen, it'd be a massive, massive level of interest.
Marty Conway is the good professor at Georgetown University. You should be following that on Twitter as well as at LinkedIn and other places where he opines intelligently about. Is there anything else, even like, do you want to talk Lamar a little bit in OTAs? Because this has certainly been the rage around here as mandatories come next week. But I don't know where the leverage game is being played one way or another. But boy, the Cleveland Browns create havoc for everyone with this deal, right?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, again, owners, I think, recognize, and again, it only takes one owner, whether it used to be George Steinbrenner or baseball, along the way, to say, no, I'm desperate, really need this to do it. Look, we can talk about it. We had 4 quarterbacks play a golf match that's probably going to draw 1 million or 2 viewers who weren't in OTAs, but we were still talking about it, because at the end of the day, the conscience of football never goes dark, even in June. The NFL has scheduled it that way to do it. So it's healthy. It's not something that Coach John Harbaugh or the general manager, Eric DaCosta, want to have necessarily, but literally it's almost good for everybody else, because it continues to talk about, what would you be talking about with respect to the Ravens if Lamar was at OTAs, right? The level of interest would be down. So I get it, totally get it, understand. Players like Lamar Jackson or any of the others, they rarely get the leverage opportunity. Once they get drafted, they rarely get that leverage opportunity. And so you have to commend them for saying, okay, this is your opportunity to move the lever when we're there. Remember back to Joe Flacco. Flacco, didn't have anything until he won the Super Bowl, and then he had all the leverage. So I think Steve Bisciotti's happy to pay Lamar if it turns out to be that way and it's a Super Bowl run. Probably not happy to pay him if things don't turn around from where they were last year. But
paying him has changed, right? I mean, the notion that the notion that Eric was going to give him an $80 million bonus last off season, and that now has gone to 230 guaranteed. That's a little. I would think that's a little rich for Steve Bisciotti's blood, and more so even against the cap and what else you'd need to do around him to give him that kind of money guaranteed.
Exactly. And that's what the Ravens have rarely wanted to do, which is to go above the cap on sort of a money versus cash versus cap situation. That's not been their track record, because they know eventually you have to even that out over 5 or longer years. But yeah, that's the thing. What do you have around it? And the way that the franchise is run, it's run with masses amount of people. It's not a 2 or 3. It's not the Packers, right? It's not 2 or 3 key players, 4 players to do it. For the Ravens to be successful, it takes a lot of players playing well, and so they have to distribute that money differently, I think, than say a couple of the other teams. So at this point, Nobody seems to be willing to take the Tom Brady route, which is to take less over a longer period of time, win more championships, and then cash it in at the end. Brady signs a huge contract to go to Fox whenever he decides to retire. I read the other day that he, led the NFLPA in terms of royalties at almost 10 million between trading cards and jerseys and all that. So all this is coming back to him at the end. I don't know if that was a massive strategy on Brady's behalf or not, but that was his choice, was to take a little less each time, surround himself with franchise type players, win championships, because he knew that that would pay off at the end. Perhaps Lamar is thinking that way, but right now it looks like he's waiting, because at this point, free agency in football turns out if you wait the longest and you sign the most recent contract, you seem to sign the biggest one.
Well, that's what Flacco convinced me of 8-9 years ago when I wrote the book. He's like, didn't matter. It didn't matter, whether I won or lost. I was going to make more money as long as I wasn't snapped in two. As long as he could play football, somebody would have been willing to make him their Matt Stafford. Nobody wanted Matt Stafford last year, right?
Right.
He was a failed guy. Matt Ryan right now. Nobody wants him, right? But these guys have that second life. Marty Conway is here. We're talking a little Lamar, certainly a lot of World Cup. Anything on baseball you want to throw in? Because I don't know the next time. I'm going to have you on once we get the bid and we're going to get excited and do all that stuff.
Sure.
But the baseball thing, my God, I see how few people are going to games almost everywhere. I was in New York for 3 days over the weekend. The Mets are doing well and the Yankees are doing well, but it doesn't feel like everybody's running out to be at the ballpark.
No, and again, I want to take you back, because COVID erased a lot of memories. A lot of people, we've sort of had pre-COVID, post-COVID. Pre-COVID, the conversations, and we were having them between you and I, but maybe we have overlooked them now, which was about this sort of massive problem that live events were having, right? College football games weren't getting football students in the stands. Attendance in virtually many of the key sports was down single digits, sometimes double digits, depending upon where you were. Again, we attributed it to too much television. We attributed it to whatever. Everything looks great until gas is $5 a gallon and bread is $7 a loaf, right? Like, there are all these contingencies that play into that. The ability to have every game live streamed to me or on my regional sports network, all these types of things. Safety and security is a huge issue in Baltimore. It's been that way for 7 years, since 2015. All these things are incremental 2%, 5%, 10% of the factors that make a decision. And what I've said before, in the Baltimore market, for example, you've got to require a lot on frequency if you're going to try to draw 2 or 3 or 3.5 million people that happened back in the early days of Camden Yards. That is people coming frequently, once a month, once every 4 or 6 weeks. Now I think you're in a situation where people are saying, that's my game, I'm going on June the 5th, and that's when we're going, because that's when we can afford to go. It's a day game, it's 4:00, it's all these other configurations. And so we forget that pre-COVID we were sort of having these kind of discussions, and then we went 1 year and now a year and a half with either no fans or limited fans. And yes, people did want to come back, some of those people, but not everybody. Look, we had the great resignation. Some people said, I'm 63, 64, I'm just going to retire. Well, they have they're in a different situation financially. So it's really not just a rebuild on the field in Baltimore, but truly it's a rebuild off the field. And they have to look at it that way, because people just aren't going to come back naturally and sort of find their way back, like the Swallows of Capistrano. That's not going to happen.
Well, the other part of it is, and this speaks to what I've been doing, which is running around seeing concerts, seeing, Robert Plant last week in New York, because I'm not going to be able to see him at Merriweather this week. By the way, Forest Hills, best kept secret. Nobody ever told me Forest Hills for a concert. I mean, it's unbelievable in this village. You feel like you're in Wimbledon and you can see Manhattan from where it's insane. So I will be going back to Forest Hills, but I've sought out concerts, right? I paid $35 to see Robert Plant the other night. I could have paid $235, but I didn't. I paid $35. That's what it was worth to me. I would not have paid $235 to see Robert Plant and Alison Krauss sing stripped down 3 Led Zeppelin songs and a bunch of country songs and cool, nice night and all that. But baseball and pricing, my summer intern Chloe went. She got a $4 ticket last week.
Yeah.
Now they were losing 10-0 when she got there. She stayed 3 innings. It was 98 degrees, like all of that. But there's the price side of this, the value side of this,
Yeah.
in regard to everything in life was taken away for 2 years. Everything, right? Eating out, everything, flying, moving, traveling. I'm getting my passport out this week for dusting it off, blowing the dust off of it, the whole deal. And then you say, all right, life's back now. What did I miss?
Yeah.
Concerts, the beach, friends, family, laughter, smiles, teeth, pretty girls, all the things I missed, and the things I didn't miss, which is, oh, I wasn't going to many games to begin with before that, or I wasn't watching this sport or that thing or being involved in this activity before. And then you take it away. It really gives everyone a sense in their heart to say, what did I miss? I missed traveling. I missed concerts. I missed the beach. Some other people, the baseball thought you missed them, and clearly, I mean that's really the hardest part is that people look like they're never going back, which is really something that they never thought that before. They always thought we'll win, everybody will come back. I don't know who everybody is anymore, Marty. That's what really worries me for baseball.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing that you notice, like it was a week or so ago, between a week and 2 weeks, we had the big blow up between Tommy Pham and Jock Peterson, right? That was all over social media,
Mhm.
right? That was an example. That was one of my prime examples of, as a sport now, the biggest difference is you have to have something cross over into a cultural phenomenon in order to
Somebody's going to punch
really
somebody.
draw interest, or something like that. NBA drama, NFL drama, baseball. Baseball was the sport with the least drama, so I think that's why it didn't, resonate as much.
But when
But
their drama is a pitcher dropping dead from
it,
drugs and,
yeah,
clubhouse
yeah,
attend, I mean, that's what's, and football's going to have this,
yeah,
right? I mean, Dan Snyder and Goodell are going to get dragged in, right?
yeah, yeah. So when you look at locally, the phenomena, and I think this was probably overlooked, right? We're going to call up our number one prospect from 3 years ago. We're going to bring him up on a Saturday. Obviously, it was Preakness Day. That wasn't advisable from the business standpoint. But I think they believe that it would catch on, whether it was at the next homestand. So they draw 15,000, I guess, the night that Adley Rutschman came up. Then if you fast forward to the next time he was there, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, played the Mariners, they drew 8,000 to 8,500 during that time frame.
No one
And
is in a
so,
hurry to see Adley Rutschman play.
right. So I'm saying that the biggest difference is when Matt Wieters was called up and there was 40,000 people, that was a baseball of interest story. Now you call up the 1-1 guy who you knew pretty far in advance was going to be called up, whatever point that was, and it doesn't shake anybody out of the trees. That would be a huge concern for me. That, in addition to him not getting off to a great start, um, this is a town that has been told for 4 or more years we're not competitive. We're not competing for first place. Let's bear that in mind. We're going to be a last place team because we're going to build that. Rutschman gets called up. He's hitting in the 130s, 140 something. Grayson Rodriguez, like any other young pitchers, have a tendency to go through a process where they do get injured. So you can't really rely. I would have advised this then. You can't really say pause the major league thing. We're going to look to the minors and really talk about them because they're young players. And the one thing we know about young players is they get injured. They get off to auspicious starts. Eventually, they rise to the level of their talent. But you've been telling people for 4 years, we're not playing for first place. So when you come out, don't think about seeing us compete for a championship or whatever it is. That is a very, very touchy strategy with a lot of backfiring. And they might be seeing some of the fruits of that, which is, oh, this pitcher that was going to come up, he may not be here at all this year because of an injury. And now we really don't know what Rutschman's about. That's not the script that they wrote. And it's not turned out that way.
Well, I was in New York, man. Both the baseball teams up there flying high, and the Nationals going through transitional this and bad baseball, and the Orioles stink right now. Marty, thank God we're going to get World Cup games next week. Let's go back to the happy side of you and me. It
Exactly
really
right.
is kind of monumental, and I'm so excited and hopeful. And it'll be a pinch me moment next week if this happens on the 16th. We'll be monitoring around here. I hope to get Marty on in the aftermath, and we'll talk about
Yep.
we are the champions. We'll do all that. Maybe we'll have some Springsteen fall dates by
Mhm.
the. Are you thinking Springsteen's going to play in the fall? I mean, should I
Well,
be like thinking that through?
from what I learned from people that were involved in the process at some stadiums and arenas around, there was a plan to come out in the fall and then, sit home for a month or two and then get back on the road to do it. Couldn't work that out with staging and some other aspects that were a part of it. So they didn't really want to do the start and stop thing. And so that's why there's no fall leg in the US that leads to a European leg in the spring. So they're going to have to come up with another solution, but we might just have to wait 6 months and have him make those appearances on the stage with Coldplay and some other things like that before he's really, and the band is really truly back together. So, but yeah, there's a massive demand. You talked about all those music acts going out. The people that I talked to in the music industry were talking about one of the bigger problems in getting bookings in stadiums was there just wasn't enough staging. Drake and some others had to cancel shows, cancel concert tours at the last minute because they just couldn't get the staging that they wanted. So it's another supply chain issue. It's labor. It's all these different things, and it takes now a year to book a solid crew to be able to go out for a year, year and a half, or maybe even 2 years.
Man, the music business, unbelievable. And Marty, sports, entertainment, we're doing it all. Soccer, we're going to get some World Cup games here next week. You can follow Marty. He does all things sports and business at Georgetown University. You can find him at Marty Conway out on LinkedIn as well as at Twitter. And hopefully you and I will get like a beer and like a sporting event, like something, right? What's
Be
what's been
fantastic.
tickling your fancy lately? You been going any games? You doing anything?
I have not been up to. I actually went to a DC United game. I hadn't been there in a while. That was a new stadium that I wanted to see. So, but it'll be baseball, whether it's the Orioles or Nats. It's time to get back out and see either the home team or who they're playing and all that. It truly is baseball season. It's June. It's great weather. It's time to get out there and do that.
All right, I want to see Otani play. So let me know when the Angels are in a couple weeks. We'll do that. I am
Okay.
Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Getting excited about World Cup games in Baltimore. Stay with us at BaltimorePositive.com.